16 days, right, down the line. So today maybe we should be expecting the inflation numbers if it didn't come out yesterday. I didn't check out. So 15th of every month is when we'll get to know how we're faring in terms of the numbers, the rate of increase or otherwise of the prices of goods and services across the country. Just to put that out there whilst we're debating about several other national issues that are quite serious as well. Guys, what's up? What's going on?
Well, the weekend had Valentine's all over, but for those who are paying attention to national issues, you'll see that, yes, INEC just before the weekend started released election timetable, but it was met by mixed reactions, really, depending on where you're looking at. Some said, well, it is what it is the law. But for those who are looking at it from the religious context, they say, well, this timing doesn't quite work, particularly Muslims who say that period is smack in the middle of Ramadan. Some have said, well, it also coincides with Lent as well. So how do we go about this? Which is why, well, at the National Assembly, there's going to be yet another sitting this week to look at that. It's quite interesting to see how the National Assembly has swung into action in recent times. And I wish we had this situation when we have major insecurity situations, just big issues as well that demand the attention of the National Assembly. But what we've seen time and again is it looks like the U.S. Congress takes up the issues more than our own National Assembly. But that's also another talking point. Add to that the issue of electronic transmission of results. It has not gone away. The joint committees are meant to harmonize today. Hopefully we'll see what will come out of it. So if you're talking national issues, that is, there are lots of talking points. And I wonder if Senator Femi Bamidele's statement, when you look at it side by side, Mr. Mikey Gide's statement helps give more clarity or just makes things or make things vague yet again. I wonder your reactions, guys, seeing those statements over the weekend.
You go first, Jeffrey.
Oh, okay.
I've
listened. I've read the statements by Mikey Guinea. I've read the statement by Femi Bamidele, the majority leader of the Senate. Let me start with the things that the majority leader said. Two things primarily. It was defending the issue around the removal of the word real time from the electronic transmission. It was also talking about the unavailability of certain kinds of infrastructure like network and power and all of that. I think the Senate is just being clever by half with the greatest sense of respect. You don't say goats don't fly because it's not in their ability to fly. You don't cook salad. That's exactly what the position of the Senate is as far as this issue, especially that has to do with that proviso. I'm going to read that proviso for everybody to hear what it is exactly. So when they talked about the presiding officers and electronically transmit and all of that, this proviso that's causing this trouble is provided that if the electronic keyword here, provided that if the electronic transmission of results fail as a result of communication failure, and it becomes impossible to transmit the result electronically from EC8A, signed and stamped by the presiding officer and countersigned by the candidate or polling agents where available at the polling unit, the form EC8A shall in such case be the primary source of collation and declaration of results. My concern, Kaida Bukola, here is the first statement is even wrong because there is nothing in that statement that is possible. I'll say it again. The BVAS was designed with 99% offline capability. The only network capability you need is the transmission. When you're sending an SMS, a WhatsApp message, the bulk of work you're doing is offline. The only time you need to now activate internet service is to click go or send or whatever the term that is used on your phone. So saying things like if the transmission of results fail, it's not possible for it to fail, dear Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is not possible for it to fail as a result of communication problem. The BVAS was designed such that when you snap, whether there's network or not, when you capture whatever word is used, as soon as you capture, Is it whether there's network or not? It stays there waiting for network. Whenever there's network, whether you get a network 4 hours later, 5 hours later, 1 minute later, 30 minutes later. So this anticipation of failure, and look at the last part, the form ECHH shall in such case be the primary source of collation and declaration of result. That is even a given. Accreditation is done electronically. Voting is done manually. Transmission of results is done electronically. Collation is done manually. If you go to, guys, if you go to section 64, subsection 4, subsection 5, subsection 6, you see that INEC has anticipated result record and transmission. And so if there is dispute in, say, the number of votes, the number of accredited voters that are submitted by a polling unit, you still defer to what is recorded and what is captured or transmitted in that sense. And they reference section 60, reference section 647 that has to do with electronic accreditation. INEC in their position paper in 2021, after they met with NCC, led by, what's his name? I've forgotten his name now, Engineer Maska, I think that's his name. And then they call it Transition Technical Committee on Electronic Transmission of Election Results. They came up with a position paper, a 23-page position paper, to show that 93% of their own polling unit, not my polling unit, INEC's polling unit, has some level of network. The other 7%, they have this GSM network, whatever. It was done by INEC, NCC, and MNOs, as mobile network operators. Okoyemi Bamidele, the House leader, in all his statement, did not in one line, to the best of my knowledge, reference such a document, and was referencing other terrain of internet bandwidth, upload and down. Look, this is all politics. This is creating room for fraud, electoral fraud, as far as I'm concerned. We can debate on the issue of real time, even though I'm not really arguing around real time so much. The point I'm making is that the provisor that expects inability to transmit, it is not possible. I say it again. BVAS was designed with 99% offline capability. The only time you need internet is when you want to upload. First of all, capture. You see the house version, they can maybe remove real time and look for another word that is close to real time. The way the Senate framed is law is I don't understand. Look at what the Senate, if they can put up that of the House of Representatives, the House version, so that I will explain what I mean. The House version is very concise. See, the Commission shall electronically transmit results from each polling unit. So it must be done at the polling unit to IREV portal. We can argue about reach time. And such transmission shall be done simultaneously with the physical collation of results. Can you remember that thing we talk about? Physical collation of results. That means that what is a result? Result is simply when all the countersigns have been done by INEC, done by, what do you call them now? Polling unit agents. So all of this explained now by the Senate from ECHA, counters, all these are unnecessary. So for me, this is high-level politics. Do you know that in that position paper in 2021, INEC was anticipating e-voting, which is even more technical than this. E-voting was what INEC was anticipating. But I saw in the Senate, when it was being voted under Lawan, senators in Lagos who don't have network problem were voting against it. I don't want to call their names. I rest my case.
Interesting, Jeffrey. Without having to reinvent the wheel, perhaps they can put up that House version again. Another component of that House version talks about transmission being done simultaneously with the physical collation of results. Simultaneously meaning all of the wards. How many do we have now? Jeffrey, please remind me, I'm not very good with figures. All of the wards.
We have about 8,000 plus wards.
8,000.
176,800 plus polling units in Nigeria.
Yes, so all of those polling units and all those wards simultaneously putting up the results on the IREV portal at the same, simultaneously, I believe means at the same time. So, and I'm emphasizing that point to, counter-argue the position put forward by the Chairman House Committee on electoral reforms that looked on, that scrutinized that bill. And as a matter of fact, decided on what we're now quoting now, but is now curiously, arguing, some form of relativism on that portion of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill as put forward by the Senate, saying what really does real-time transmission of results mean. That simultaneously has voted by the House, covers that. That means that, from wherever you are, after you have voted, in the comfort of your home, your workplace, your house, you can see the results being uploaded. And that suggests that in all of the networks, in all of the polling units that have networks, after elections have been done and collation has been done, and all party agents and all concerned have countersigned on forms EC8A, the results will be transmitted simultaneously on the IRF portal, and everybody can see the results. That is election transparency, and that is why the electronic transmission of results is so critical to the ongoing reforms that the National Assembly has considered, unfortunately, for 2 years. Now, to the point put forward by former INEC resident electoral commissioner, Mr. Mike Igini, he's just from the point of view of an experienced electoral officer saying, look, this could work against you if you do not vote for electronic transmission of results. And that is, to argue to the point that for those who are elected representatives right now, either at the executive level or at the National Assembly level, if indeed you seem to be doing the work in line with the demands of the electorate and dividends of democracy are indeed reaching the grassroots, then you may be working against yourself if you do not vote for electronic transmission of results. But if you did, then you have nothing to fear. But the question is really, what is the electoral class afraid of by not voting for electronic transmission of results? And that's why there's a huge question mark on the argument put forward by the Senate leader about infrastructure challenge. And for me, it was interesting to note that there's an honest admission for the first time that we have real, infrastructure problems. He talked about power infrastructure in that document. He talked about internet connectivity in that document, of course, which goes against the position paper put forward by INEC that brought us here in the first place, which acknowledged the challenge of human interference in our election management process, and as a result advocated for electronic transmission of results. But the part about infrastructure was an honest admission, which under different circumstances would have been argued against. But the point having been made, if indeed INEC itself had said in advance that in 93% of our polling units there is internet connectivity, why are our elected representatives putting forward arguments to the contrary that contradict the fact that is obvious on ground? And so this debate about electronic transmission of results will continue even beyond the point where the bipartisan committee, comes up with its position. But the more important question really, guys, is now that INEC has released the timetable, is it predicated on the 2022 Electoral Act or the one that we're expecting, which would be the Electoral Act Amendment Bill that should become law, after the bipartisan committee has concluded its work?
INEC is
not
right
clear
in what
right
is
now.
done. So we have an extant law. It's called the Electoral Act 2022. So that's the extant law as far as it's stands. And that extant law expects them to follow through the 360 days or so to put out a timetable. We're hoping that by now all of these arguments and all of the fine lines would have been sorted. But unfortunately, it hasn't. So we have to work with what we have, which is why INEC had to put out that timeline before the 20th, so that we have the time to, there could be a revised timetable. So right now we don't have any other law apart from the
Electoral Act
2022. Until this is signed into law, then we can now say we have a new law, and then we'll begin to work around it. But for now, it's 2022 Electoral Act we're working with right now.
Well, some things are clear. Nigeria has over 90% internet coverage, whether you're saying 2G, 3G, and above. And the BVAS is able to work with, in fact, the slowest internet. All it needs is just a little drop of internet. When it gets it, it's able to upload. I didn't see that in the Senate leader's statement. I mean, these are things touted by the NCC already. But hey, it's important that we pay attention to this as well as the other issues in the Electoral Act, issues around punitive measures for those who engage in either buying PVCs or what have you. There are issues around even the identification itself. Can we have another form of identification, or can people print their PVCs, particularly for those with disabilities or those who are not able to get their PVCs for one reason or the other? They shouldn't be disenfranchised. So there are really lots of issues. Internal party politics as well. There's all of that process that would lead to who the flag bearer of the party is. Issues around litigation. When should litigation be done with before inauguration, or should we still have the case where we do it up until after it? So as much as electronic transmission is very important, you see the electoral process stands on various legs. So it's almost like distraction sometimes when you think about it, because I've looked at that provision and thinking, how would you manually transmit to IREV? Is it that you would take the paper and write on IREV? I don't know. There's really nothing to me like manual transmission for IREV. So sometimes you think, is this a distraction? Is someone trying to take us for a ride? Is it that some people do not even understand what this process is about? Is this much ado about nothing, a storm in a teacup? As much as possible, we want all the legs to be strong. So let's dispense with this electronic transmission, but other legs, we must ensure they're strong.
My position on that is that the manual transmission would be, taking the physical paper as was in the past to the collation.
But that's already what's in the law.
That's what Kari is saying, is that you can only collate physically. Manually, you can't transmit
manually.
How will you transmit? Would you take the paper and just slip it into the server?
Then it's not been transmission anymore. Guys, it will be transportation.
But that's what we have already.
That's why I keep saying that there is nothing that will happen in 2027 that did not happen in 2023. It just take a subsidiary, delegated or inferior law, make it an act of parliament, so that even INEC did not give a proviso in the last election in his own guidelines, which is why everybody took them to the cleaners and said, why didn't you do this, why didn't you do that? Guys, before we let this go, I want to show them something. If a producer can put up the slide about the 2021 position paper. I want you to read, if you see what is marked there. That is the 2021 position paper when INEC was trying to sell this idea of electronic transmission, and even went ahead for e-voting. Look at those lines underlined. The Joint Committee also found that mobile networks adequately covered 93% of INEC polling units. The committee went on to allocate polling units to the 4 major network operators, Airtel, Glo, 9 Mobile, and MTN, for the purpose of transmitting election results. With the greatest sense of respect, a man I respect so much, one of the most respected senators, Payemi Bamidele, he did not reference this. So where did this is a 2021 document.
And Jeffrey, and that also, recalls the point, which flies in the face of reason, really, by the way, of the Senate President when he said that Nigerians were misrepresenting the position of the Senate when they said that the Senate was voting for what, transpired in 2023, which is, exactly what would happen if we do not get electronic transmission of results. So it is the same way that results had been collated in 2023, that they would be collated in 2027. There would be no difference if we go by the Senate's position that there shall be electronic transmission of results, but with manual backup. And that opens the door wide to election rigging, where we see collation centers in government houses, when we see governors standing by election results and all of that. So it opens the door wide to another round of election rigging and controversial election declaration of results, and perhaps resident electoral commissioners going ahead to declare results, as we saw in Adamawa State prior to the conclusion of an electoral process. And so this is what the electronic transmission of results, without any caveat, is set to address.
There's nothing like manual transmission. I will say it time and again. There's nothing like manual transmission to IREF. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense to me. It can only be transmitted via internet. Right. But let's take a look at how the dailies are reporting all of the big stories in a moment. Stay with us.